scope of things, what all work we have to complete is listed in another thing which we call as a product backlog. That is under the control of a product owner in Scrum. The sprint backlog is under the control of the team. The team takes the product backlog from the product owner and it makes from that the sprint backlog based on the priority which is given by the product owner. He says, this is my priority and these things are stable, so please you have to work on it. So taking the requirements from the product backlog, the team goes and develops their own sprint backlog. So that is a general term that they are using, requirement constitute backlog. I hope it is clear. Any questions, please? Because I understand you people don't have much exposure to agile environments. Any questions, anyone? Okay.
Ronnie, hello.
Yes.
What does it mean by better to make a prototype based on unclear requirement?
Yes. See, if you have a requirement and you're not getting a very much clarity on it, instead of making complete the thing, it's good to make a small prototype, okay, and evolve it. So what happens in the case of agile is we do something known as refinement of the backlog. So when the team is actually working in the 3 weeks of making a product, what they also do is they take a little time out and see for the next part what they have to do, what they have to do after this week, 3 weeks are over, or the 3 weeks after that. And if they find they have got something which is not very clear for them, they will make an entry in their sprint backlog itself that we have to work on a little prototype for the work which is coming for the next 3 weeks. So based on that clarity and that discussion, when the time comes, they can include this activity very, very clearly in their sprint backlog. Is it clear, Kanchi?
So this prototype is not for the immediate requirements. It is for the future and upcoming requirements.
Yes, generally that's the way they work. So you have a current work, whichever you are doing, you are clear on that. Then that means mainly the reason that the work has been taken, and team takes a time out from their regular activities, which is very much built into the plan itself. That they have to take this much time out to refine the future requirements. So you sit with the product owner or with the customer to gain a clarity, make a prototype, give them the assessment so that you get more clarity and then it is possible for you to expand it out.
Okay, so essentially this requirement falls under the scope which has been clarified with the customer, but this
Yes.
requirement itself is not clear.
Yes, it's not clear to us. Okay. There might be a possibility that even customer has not thought it completely. The doubts which we are having, it might
Mm-hmm.
be that even he had never had those doubts. Okay.
Okay.
Generally, working with a customer who is very clear with his requirement is easy. It's the other way around which is more difficult.
Okay, Ronnie, sorry, just I'm asking, taking it through one example.
Okay.
If I want to include I have an expectation from customer that forgot password icon should be there at the opening of the web page, or I have an expectation from a customer that start stop buttons should be available at my dashboard in my physical product delivery. Now, when I say that forgot password should be there, this is a scope or this is a requirement for me as a project manager working under a project manager as a team member?
See, your scope would be, are you allowing to interact with someone or you want to have someone interacting with your web page or with your website or not? So if the person says, okay, there is no interaction needed, we only provide an information, there's no user account which is needed. So if they say scope should include user account, then all these things come into picture. Is it clear?
Ronnie, sorry, one more follow-up query.
Yes, sure.
While we go ahead with a project, you said that project scope gets clarified as and when we proceed with the project.
Yes.
At any point in the project, if someone is not a part of the initial phases of the project and joins midway, how do you segregate whether this is a project requirement or this is a scope? Is there a way to bifurcate between a project scope and a requirement? Like I
I
have a
think.
problem, like what I mean to ask is, if I have a problem statement in front of me, how
Hmm.
will I be able to identify whether this is coming as a requirement under a defined scope or this is a scope change?
You will have your scope document available with you. So you have to refer that whether this is given in your scope anytime or not. Let me see. You have. your part which is collect requirements and define scope.
Yeah.
So if you, they will produce out a document which would be very clearly describing what all things are there. So tomorrow, if you get a problem statement, you have to just go to these documents which are coming out of collect requirements and define scope to see
But
whether it is included there or not.
we discussed it sometime earlier that this scope which is defined in the beginning of the project is also iterative. It gets I mean more refined as and when the project proceeds ahead.
Yes. Still not able to get your question. If I understand your question is, if someone is joining and they see something new, how do they make
Yeah.
sure this is included or not included? So you go with respect to the document and you see whether it is included or not included. But you see that, okay, this is very clearly an area. Suppose like user account is not at all needed. Okay, it is not included. It is very clear. You can have a gray area where it is said it is not included, but some of the features has been asked for. What does it supposed to mean? Get it clarified. Uh, Other than that, I'm sorry, I have not understood your question then.
My question was if we have some kind of requirement, and I'm not just specifically talking about IT product management, if we have some kind of requirement coming from the customers in the midway,
Yes.
by looking at the requirement, is there a way to identify whether this is a requirement under a defined scope or is it a scope change which is being asked by customer? No, because my personal experience is customers are not very explicit when they inform that they are asking for a change in the scope.
Okay, I think I understand. So there would be something known as a scope baseline. Okay, so you will have a baseline scope for that particular moment. Okay, because as the requirements are changing, you will always change the baseline and you will put a new baseline. So with respect to the given baseline, if your requirement is matching it, it is included. If it is not in matching, it is not included. If it is not included, there can be only two possibilities: whether we have to work on it or we have to consider it's a part of a scope change. Now this involves a discussion with the customer. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Scope
Sure.
baseline is what we will have in a project management plan.
Yes, if you remember, in project management plan, we had told about three baselines: scope baseline, schedule baseline, and cost baseline.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Rani, understood.
Okay. Any other questions, please? So we're going to study all these part. So we have got six processes which we have to study, basically which are included as a part of planning and monitoring itself. Okay. So it's in terms of process group, we are only working with in the scope. We are only working with respect to planning and monitoring. So we'll start with the first process, which is the plan scope management. So what does it do? It's the process of creating scope management plan that documents how the project and product scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. So anytime if someone has supposed to ask a question, what should I do with this plan, or how to find out what is the plan, how to validate a plan, how to, so not to, how to validate a plan, how to validate a scope, how to control a scope. Okay, all this answer should be provided in your scope management plan, which is a output of your plan scope management. So scope manage, how you are going to manage your scope and how you're going to manage your requirements. Both are a part of your scope management plan scope management process. So anytime any question on the project which arises with respect to scope or the requirement, your these two documents should be able to guide you. Okay, until something new comes, which means that even these two documents need a prevision. Is it clear?
Yes, Ronnie.
Yes, Ronnie.
Okay, so inputs, project charter. Okay, can anyone tell me with their memory what does project charter is including?
Objective deliverables and basically the project sponsor and who is the project manager.
Yes. And it includes at a very high level description of a project and a high level description on the scope of project also.
Yes.
Okay. Other than that, based on that, you have to make a project management plan where you're more certainly interested with your quality management plan. Okay, because that will mean that how you, with respect to scope, how you, there would might be changes which can be expected. What is your life cycle of the project or the development approach we are going to take? Okay, So that's the reason you need the project management plan also. Enterprise environment factors, organization's culture, infrastructure which is available, personal administration, how is the marketplace. OPS we have specifically discussed with respect to planning. In planning, what are the sort of OPS we have already discussed in integration management. Tools and technique, as usual, always first expert judgment. People who really are very familiar or specialized, okay, on the similar type of project or industry. We can do lot of meetings with different people on discussing which is the best ways to manage. Another one is what we say as data analysis, or what part is what we call as alternative analysis. Various ways of collecting requirements, elaborating the project and product scope, creating the product, validating, controlling the scope are evaluated. What are the other alternatives available? If I take a way to do a work of collecting the scope or requirement, is there any other alternative which is available as a part of the complete process, or only as a part of a small part of the process? So I just need to change a small area in the process. So this is one of the techniques you can use to develop a better scope management plan or a requirement management plan. Any questions on these, please? Completely followed or nothing followed? It can be one of them. Ayush, Kachi, Iti, Shiva, Nagur.
Expert judgment is okay, but this data analysis, can you elaborate it once again?
Sorry, can you be a little louder, please?
This data analysis,
Yes.
can you elaborate it once again?
Yes. So here we have got what we say as the alternative analysis. Okay. So if I tell to you that going from point A to point B, it's easy. The most easiest way is to take a bus.
Okay,
Now, question is there a better way to do it, which is good both in terms of time and cost? Is it possible that I can walk a certain distance? I can take taxi for a certain distance, then I can take a bus for the remaining distance, or some other way that I take a taxi for distance and I share it out with some people. So what are the other alternative which are available to me? So that's why I say various ways of how you should collect the requirements. Just meeting people is okay. Do I need to prepare a questionnaire in some cases? Do I need to conduct any type of surveys? So
okay,
which is would be the better way? What are the alternatives available? And each to analyze each alternative, you will have lot of parameters or more than one parameter. Is it clear?
okay.
Any other question, please? So output here is the scope management plan. Okay. Either it can be independent document or it can be a component of your PMP that describes how the scope would be defined, validated, monitored, controlled, and validated. The component of scope management plan include process for preparing a project scope statement, which means to say what would be in scope and what is out of the scope. Creation of WBS, that is work breakdown structure. We are going to learn about this in details. It establishes how scope baseline will be approved and maintained, who has the authority to create a scope baseline, okay, and how it is maintained with respect to minor revision, major revision, when it can be changed. The process that specifies how a formal acceptance of the completed project deliverables would be obtained. Is it be given by the customer's manager or the quality, okay, or the team? Each team leads will give up their own approvals, how it is going to be. Scope management plan can be formal, informal, broadly framed, or highly detailed based on the needs of the project. So this is an example of project scope statement. So we have taken IVR, which is generally which is integrated voice recording project. Okay. So it will handle and direct sales call. So whenever you call something, they say press one for this, press two for this. So we are designing a integrated voice recording project. So it says at a high level what is your scope distribution, what is in scope, what is out of the scope, what are the deliverables, what is your extraction criteria, constraint, assumptions with respect to scope. Just a simple example. How does a scope statement looks like?
But Ronnie, this could very much be similar to the charter as well.
It would be more detailed.
Hmm.
Charter never says in scope or out scope. It just gives it at a high level.
Okay. Is that the only difference? Because rest other things I find similar. Constraints and
No,
conditions are also not there in the charter, I believe. No, it is there.
it is there, but if see, it is there at a high level.
Hmm.
Scope contain more details.
So charter is higher level form of the scope document.
No, it is a higher level form of whatever is information is available at that point of time. Okay, it is if you see the scope is prepared when it is prepared at the initiation part.
Right.
Okay, and your scope is a part of a planning. So this is place where you are more elaborating, more discussing with the customer. So you will have more and more clarity. Okay, and this is something which will keep getting elaborated.
Right. Okay.
Okay, then there is also requirement management plan. This is to say that how the requirements would be analyzed, documented, and managed. Okay, so what is the priority of the requirements, why this requirement is included, traceability that reflects the requirement attributes captured, and on the traceability matrix. I'll come back to this traceability matrix. It's also known as the business analysis plan. The requirements management plan is also known as the business analysis plan. So that would be the output of your plan scope management. How to manage the scope and how to manage the requirements. Any questions? So this process, if you see plan scope management, uh, it does not, you see in terms of tools and techniques. Okay, it is very people oriented. You do not have much what you say much of tools and techniques which you have to use. It's very people oriented on how you are going to work about it. Any questions here, please? Shall I proceed?
Yes, sir.
So next part is what we call as the collect requirements. Okay, so this is place where we are going to collect the requirements. So based on that, we can start defining the scope. So again, the inputs, project charter, because it gives it a higher data, project management plan, more importantly, your scope management and the requirement management plan, and stakeholder engagement plan to make out which stakeholders should be engaged to collect the requirements. Okay. Other project document, stakeholder register, which contains list of all the stakeholders, any lessons learned which have to use any particular assumptions. Okay. If needed, your business documents. Which are the business documents we have studied? Have you studied any business document?
Yes. NDAs, etc.
Sorry.
Non-disclosure agreements
No.
or
The
contracts.
no. We have studied the business document. This is your
Code
business
of ethics.
case. You have to have a business case you make. We have studied business case, doc.
Yes.
What is it? Anyone remembers?
A business case is basically a document given stressing on why the project is necessary and in alignment with the organization strategy and etc.
No. You're missing the most important. Gives the with respect to economic feasibility.
Yeah, and economic feasibility. Yes.
That is the most important thing.
Yes.
Rest things are later. So it gives the economic feasibility of the project. Okay. So in terms of EF and OPS, nothing much is changing. So let's come with respect to tools and technique. Very important. Business analysis, we required people who are expert in collecting the data, how to write a requirement. Okay. Have you people had any training or any time you have heard about how you should write the requirement?
No.
Okay. So there are ways and methods. There is something known as is a boilerplate template. That was one of the methodology which used to follow. And they also had always had the statement, the system shall do this. And you can have your standards with respect to writing the requirement that in one cell you will ask system to do only one particular job. If it has to do two or three particular job, it has to write it in different cells. So you can have your different ways of writing a requirement. So it is very, very clear with respect to everyone. That's what we say mean about requirement elicitation. How to write a requirement. It's an art. Okay. Instead
Are we
of
going to study it?
no, That is not in the current scope on how you should write a requirement. Okay, because it very much it depends on the industry you are working.
Okay. Any open source where we can find info on this?
I think you can search for templates for writing requirement or standards for writing requirements. So they can give you, again, it would be very specific to an industry. That's the reason I think last time also I told you, you will have some specific communities of your organizations or your whichever field you are working. So those people would be having this best practices.
Okay.
Or another thing which can be done is in your organization over a period of time, you might have a requirement or lessons learned
Yes.
on how you should write a requirement based on previous pitfalls that you might have encountered. Okay. So these are the people who are experts in all these things. Collecting requirement just not doesn't mean that you collect the requirement. You have to also reproduce it out so that the team can understand and work on it. You might have to also involved on the data gathering. So brainstorming, interviews, focus groups. We have seen what's the difference between brainstorming and focus group in our last class. Anyone remembers it?
Focus groups are have a particular agenda in mind. Brainstorming is focused on generating the ideas as much as possible.
Yes. So brainstorming is if you have a problem to solve, you will discuss it out and you will generate the ideas to solve it and discuss on the solution. Focus group starts with the point that idea is already available to you, and you only focus on that particular idea, how to expand it, okay, and how to put details into it. It is focused on a particular solution. Remember these things?
Yes, Ron.
Okay. Questionnaire and surveys. We can also use questionnaire and surveys. Benchmarking, we have seen comparing what is happening in the industry with respect to what you are going to do. So best practices which are available to you, all this can be done or can be used out. Okay. Like I said, using a particular template which is a standard in your industry. So it's like you're following a benchmarking. Data analysis, we have already discussed. Decision making, we have already discussed. I don't know whether you're able to recollect. In decision making, we have seen two things. What is a type of we can have about this making decision with respect to voting or decision by using multi criterias. Anyone remembers? Yes, no, maybe, could be, possibly. Okay. See, the thing is, I cannot keep repeating the same thing. It consumes a lot of time and space. So once the technique is taught, if you have a doubt, please let me know. But otherwise, you have to start recollecting it out. So if we have seen different types of voting. It's a simple, you have met voting plurality or majority.
Yes, Ronnie.
Okay. So that's why I'm emphasizing that you have this type of recollection. Okay. We have also seen representation. If we want to represent a data, we also represent the requirements. We also have seen affinity diagrams when we have studied quality management. Anyone remembers the affinity diagrams?
That's plotting. The scatter plot or box plot was
No,
there.
no, that is not affinity. Affinity is you put the requirements based on a certain groupings. So you take first requirement and you say, okay, I think we have to create a new group, you put it. Second requirement might be a new group. Third requirement again can be new group, or you can say, yes, it belongs to the existing group. So the literal meaning of affinity, the closeness. So there are certain groups and you start putting requirement based on certain groups. That's one way of representing the requirement.
Okay.
Anyone remembers with respect to quality management, we have studied affinity diagrams.
Yes, yes, Ronnie.
Okay, because there are many tools and techniques which work across the knowledge areas. There is mind mapping, which we had again studied in quality. It says that how whatever comes to your mind, how you're able to map it to a pencil and paper. Okay. So I had given you one example. This is another example. Okay. Yes.
Ronnie, can you please spend some more time on mind mapping again if it's okay?
Okay. So it is nothing, but it's not a very well defined. It's just a way that you can map whatever things are coming to your mind. Okay. so that they are forming in a you are able to represent them in a very constructive way instead of writing them as a text and jumbling them across. So you are able to represent them and able to interlink them in a certain way. So I have to start a meeting. So meeting should have an agenda. In terms of agenda, what things are needed, I have to market that these type of meeting is going to happen. So what I need to do in that case. Okay. So which again, with respect to website, what things should be present, and if I'm doing development of that, what all things should be there. So there is a linking here. So it's not something which is very well defined. It only means to say in your mind things are there. How are you going to map it with respect to a particular diagram? So in a way, if you find it is, you look it closely, it is something similar to affinity.
Yes.
Okay, but it is something little more than that, because as and when ideas are generating, you are talking within the groups also. In affinity, you're only putting requirements with the group. Here you're doing more than that. If you have got requirement which is talking to another group, you're pointing it out also. Is it clear?
Yes.
Any questions, please? um I had
Ronnie,
one.
can
Yes,
um,
please.
this mind mapping technique, can you give one more example on how do we apply it in real life scenarios?
Is it okay I take the same example which I have given in the quality management?